From the Men in Black to a flying man, fire watchers seem to see some pretty terrifying things while on duty. I'm your host, Melissa Melotti, and here are your top 10 terrifying discoveries made by fire watchers. In our number 10 spot we have The Roar. This is a story about a girl named Alice who had been a fire watcher for a few years and never had any problems. She would go to work for 8 hours and then leave. She would of course see rustling in the trees and assume it was an animal of some sort, but that's it, no issues. Until one unfortunate night when she was just settling into her shift, when she realized that she had forgotten her iPod in the car. She knew that it was highly discouraged to leave the tower, especially after sundown, but man, music is her everything, and she felt that the potential mental torture from not having it would be worth the risk. So as quick as she could, she left her base, ran to her car, and grabbed her iPod. She said that it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes in total. When she returned, she noticed that the door was open. Ah crap. She immediately looked for cover to hide. About a minute after finding cover, she heard a deafening roar that she swears sounded otherworldly, and then she heard something that sounded like big footsteps leaving. After some time had passed and she felt sure that the creature had left, she slowly made her way to the tower. But when she opened the door, much to her surprise, it appeared untouched, almost as if no one even went inside. To this day, she's still confused about that night. Maybe she was just tired and hallucinated the whole thing, but she swears she was not on any illicit substance and that roar was monster-like. In our number 9 spot we have The Men in Black. This is a story by a man named Gabe, who had been working a shift at the watchtower when he noticed 2 black SUVs drive into the trail in the distance and eventually disappeared among the trees. Seeing this of course put him on high alert, as it was pretty early in the morning and the sun was just rising. He found himself really paying attention to see if he could spot any further movement by them. Some time passed when suddenly he hears a loud gunfire. He immediately feels a wave of anxiety as it dawns on him that either an animal was shot or a human. But something told him that 2 black SUVs rolling up in the woods so early in the morning meant that it was probably more likely a human assassination than an animal. He sat there, letting his imagination run wild, when 2 large men knocked on the door of the tower. They were definitely special agents or security guards. He let them in, thinking that if they were violent, they would just come in anyway. They started questioning him, clearly trying to find out if he saw anything. He quickly replied no, and did everything in his power to convince them. Seemingly satisfied that he was telling the truth, they just left. That was probably the most intense moment in his 5 years on the job. He never experienced anything quite like that again. Damn, that sounded like he witnessed a top secret assassination. Holy bejesus. In our number 8 spot we have The Flying Man. In North Carolina, circa 2003, an old man by the name of John was on duty at his watchtower. It was about 4 AM and as usual, as he put it, he was in his chair guarding the land. He liked to think of himself as some kind of important guard of a magical land such as Middle-earth. Yes, he grew up obsessed with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He had a small TV in the tower with him and he would often watch reruns of old shows like Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, and Gilligan's Island, to name a few. So that's what he was doing on this particular night. He was feeling rather sleepy and was on the brink of dozing off when suddenly he saw something jump into the sky in the corner of his eye. Startled, he got out of his chair and tried to see what it was. Normally he would have grabbed his binoculars, but it was still too dark and the sun wasn't going to rise for another 2 hours. Just then, he saw it again. Whatever it was jumped high into the sky and then back down into the trees. What was that, he thought. It looked too big to be a bird, but he couldn't quite make out what it was. He waited for a second and then he saw it again. But this time he saw what it was as it jumped directly under the moonlight. He knows how crazy it sounds, but without a doubt he said he saw a human face and what looked like a human jumping. He immediately felt terrified, ducked down, and hid in the tower cot and stayed there for a good hour. Nothing happened afterwards. The sun came up and eventually he left the tower to go home, but he has never forgotten that night, and he has never seen anything like that ever again. In our number 7 spot we have the liar. This is the story of a female fire watcher who was on her way to start her shift when she noticed a man with long, straight black hair wearing a long leather black cloak and spiky boots. She wouldn't have thought that this was that out of the ordinary, as she's come across a few punk rockers in her time, but on this particular day it was literally 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was almost impossible to breathe. So the fact that there was a person alive wearing a long leather coat on this day was insanity. She noticed him out of the corner of her eye standing beside his car, just staring at her as she left her car. She smiled, trying to be polite, and then started picking up her pace and walked towards her tower. He began to follow her, and he must have ran to catch up with her because as quick as a blink, he was right behind her saying, "Hello." She jumped from the surprise and said, "Hi," back. He asked her where she was going. She told him that she was going to work and that she was kinda in a rush. He said, "No problem. Why don't you just give me your number and we can talk later?" At this point, she was scared about saying no, as he clearly had already shown signs of insanity, but she also didn't want to give this potential psycho her actual number. So she just said, "I'm sorry, but I have a boyfriend." He didn't respond right away, and so she picked up her pace and she waved to him, thinking that the conversation had died and that he would just walk away. But then he screamed, "Liar!" She jumped and turned around to see him just glaring at her. She decided to make a run for it. When she got to the tower, she quickly locked the door, and thankfully, he never followed her. She decided to take some self-defense classes after this incident, just in case anything like this ever happened again. Probably a good idea. In our number 6 spot we have the witches. According to this fire watcher, witch rituals aren't particularly uncommon to see in the forest. At least around their Sabbaths, you will see covens of witches gathering around and chanting around a fire in the middle of the forest. Sometimes naked. Yes, she could see them with her binoculars. She assures you that she wasn't being a creep, but she just wanted to make sure that they were safe, and watching for fires is literally her job. Regardless of how truly risky it is to start a bonfire in the forest, in this area in particular where this fire watcher works, she would be highly against any after-hour meetup, as she has seen many a deadly animal in the woods in her time. But it doesn't matter how many signs you put up, people never listen. She always has to report the covens for the mini bonfires, and it always makes her feel frustrated because she wants people to be able to practice their religions, but why do they have to risk an entire forest fire? In any case, she gets shook every time she sees them and their naked ways. Fascinating. I'm the type of person to wear fleece in bed in the summer, so the idea of dancing around naked outside at any point sounds torturous to me. In our number 5 spot we have the Flash. This particular fire watcher hasn't had a lot of weird experiences in the year that he has been on duty, but there have been a few questionable occurrences. The watcher said that every so often you'll be looking out and you'll see a light flash randomly in the forest. Not like a firefly type of glittery flash, but a bright flash. He's asked his co-workers, and they've also noticed this strange occurrence every so often. He has also seen a lot of extremely fast objects in the sky. You could argue that they are planes, but they're seemingly way faster than planes. Perhaps it could be a plane that the government has invented that is extremely fast and we just don't know about it yet. Or it could be aliens, one of the two. But he'll never forget the first time he saw the abnormally fast plane or alien ship, as he had never seen anything like that before, and for a second he did feel a bit scared that perhaps some kind of foreign entity was about to land on Earth. But it was late at night and he was pretty tired. In our number 4 spot we have the Dogman. This is the story of a man that was on duty at a watchtower in Michigan. It was the year 2007. It was just a regular day, nothing out of the ordinary happened from what he can remember. He had a 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, and so he was getting ready for another long night. The night had gotten pretty dark fairly quickly, and so he was looking out into basically an almost pitch black wonderland with a million stars in the sky and the moon being the main source of light over the forest. Some time had passed when all of a sudden he heard the weirdest howl that he had ever heard before. It was either a wolf that was sick or an animal that he had never come across before because it was a weird screeching howl. He looked around to see if he could spot its owner when he saw some movement down below. He continued watching the spot when suddenly he saw the craziest thing. It was a dog, but with the body of a human. It took everything in him not to scream and run for his life, but he thought he was most likely safer in the fire tower, and he was right. That weird creature never revealed himself ever again, but whoa, was that scary. In our number 3 spot we have the stare. One night, this fire watcher was working an overnight shift. She was very aware of campers being in the woods that night because it was summer and people tended to camp in her forest quite a lot. So it wasn't alarming for her to see a man walking through the area below her tower, as she assumed that it was just one of her campers. But when she got a closer look at the man, she noticed that he was holding a knife in his hand, in a very horror movie-like way. And the next thing she knew, the man was looking up at her, and they were having a full-on staring contest for what she said felt like an eternity. The man, still holding the knife, smiles at her, then continues on his way. She immediately checked the locks on the tower to make sure that they were locked, but she never saw him after that. Probably one of the creepiest, most alarming 20 seconds of her life. In our number 2 spot we have the spaceship. This particular fire watcher by the name of Kyle began telling his story by prefacing that being a fire watcher and a forest service worker, you see a lot more strange things that you can't rationalize or explain than you do fires. He would not recommend this job to anyone that fears the unknown. One memory that he will never forget is of a light in the sky that was just lingering. He became particularly interested in it because it didn't look quite like a star. It was this skinny vertical object that was bright and just hanging out in the sky. At some point it looked like something on it flashed, kind of like the lights on a plane, except this was on the bottom of its vertical tail and it wasn't red. He continued to look at it when suddenly, at an incredible lightning speed, it disappeared into the sky. Whoa. So basically this guy saw a spaceship, wild, but honestly if you're sitting around and just staring at the wilderness and the sky for 8 hours, you're bound to witness a spaceship at some point, I think. Coming up in our number 1 spot we have the Mudman. This story is told by a fire watcher named Alex who never thought that he would want to be a fire watcher, but he saw an opening for a position that paid 10 grand a month, and so he obviously wasn't going to turn it down. 10 grand a month, holy moly. I wonder if this position is straight out of our tax dollars, because seriously, 10 grand is a ridiculous amount for this person, and if I'm paying for this, well, I'ma be writing a stern letter. Let's be real, I def wouldn't, but whatever. Ridiculous. Anyways, so this guy Alex began his first shift at the watchtower, and as he enters the tower he finds a letter from his coworker on things he should know about the job. The coworker listed a bunch of things that he should be aware of, such as don't go out in the middle of the night, if you hear anything in the middle of the night stop what you're doing and hide, and oh yeah, here's a gun just in case. Okay, starting to see why this job may pay so high. In any case, Alex starts his first shift. Everything is going well until around 3 a.m. in the morning when he begins to hear the sound of metal creaking. He felt a sharp pain in his stomach, and out of fear, he ran to the cot in the corner to hide. Just then, the door opened and he saw something that didn't look human, like a humanoid. With every step, a squish sound came with it. It walked to his cot and then eventually turned around and left. Later on, while talking to his coworker, he was informed that he had his first encounter with what they have called the Mudman. Apparently one of the many monsters in this forest. Okay, yep, well that's terrifying. I kinda wish they had installed a camera because we the people need to see evidence of this, like now. Well, this was fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed writing it. See you next time and have a good day. She immediately checked the locks on the tower to make sure they were, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm like stuttering a little bit.